So, today, we're going to go over a cross-country story. And I know, I kind of have a thing for them. But this one's actually based on a true story about a man named Alvin Strait, who happens to drive 300 miles from Iowa to Wisconsin to be able to patch things up with his brother. So don't worry, there's going to be a little bit of... Wait a minute. Did I just say David Lynch? The same David Lynch who created this? Okay, whoa. Could you imagine seeing this old man Alvin driving his lawnmower in the background of Blue Velvet and waving over to Freddy as he finds that ear in that field? Oh, man. Alright. Well, let's just start up our lawnmowers and dig straight into the Strait story. This movie starts off with Richard Farnsworth as Alvin, which you might know him or might remember him as the sheriff in Misery. He has a health problems and Sissy Spacek plays as his mentally challenged daughter, Rose.
What have you done to my dad? Are you okay, Dad?
I just need a little help getting up, honey.
Alvin gets a call that his brother had just had a stroke, so Alvin has the urge to drive to him and patch things up and make up for lost times over a bitter rival that they had for the last couple of years. However, the only problem is, due to his health, he's unable to have a license and be able to drive to him. So, this pushes him to all outs to be able to rig up his lawnmower with a trailer and does whatever it takes to be able to drive to see him. This journey is mainly about redemption, similar to Nebraska, but it's also all about family, just like Coupe de Ville. I think this movie has a little bit of a tie-in with the Bible, like most films tend to do. One of the most relatable verses to this movie that helps sums up the meaning behind this film is James 5:19, which James 5:19 says, "My brethren, if any among you strays from the truth and one turns him back, let him know that he who turns a sinner from the error of his way will save his soul from death and will recover a multitude of sins." Throughout the film, Alvin meets people through his journey, and he tells them stories that are very touching and very compelling that really hits you hard as the audience. But what actually happens, not just the audience does it hit you, but the people in the film as well. So what happens most of the time, it almost makes him look like this angel or this wanderer that comes by and just gives these strangers a whole new outlook and a whole new different way of living. They kind of put themselves in perspective and it really changes their life. One of the first examples of this is that Alvin runs into a girl who runs away, in which they meet by the campfire and he tells her about his daughter Rose. And he starts to tell the runaway girl that how Rose's mentality caused her to lose her kids, which kind of swings the runaway to realize family is all you have, and thus he wakes up to her leaving and going back home and realizing she made a mistake. And there are plenty of examples in this film where he turns them from the error of their way will recover his multitude of sins. Because with these stories you can see how Alvin's a good man, but he does start to reveal that he's kind of got some shakiness and kind of error of his way in his history to where he feels like he has to redeem himself. I mean, one of the prime examples is seeing his brother Lyle and doing whatever it takes to be able to go see him. But he also has this moment right before the end of the film that he shares his war stories of when he was in World War II with another man who was also in World War II. And it kind of shows that they both had their darkness to them, where they've had their drinking problems, and they can't shake off the hell that they've been through. And you can see that with that verse, you can kind of see where Alvin's trying to do what it takes to be able to shake that off and kind of forgive his sins. Now, I could be over analyzing it, but that is the beauty of film. That you watched a good movie when you're able to see it 100 different ways, or talk about it with somebody else and hear different kind of ways that they might have seen it completely different from the way you seen it, but you can see where they're coming from. But one thing that I do know, for instance, is that this is a fantastic film. It's definitely one of those movies that you watch and it just won't get away from your conscience after a few days. You know, you keep thinking about it while you're at work, and then you think about it, you're like, man, that was such a good movie. And you want to talk and express it to other people. And that's exactly how David Lynch movies are. If you've never seen Eraserhead or Blue Velvet, it is definitely one of those type of movies. And that just shows you how good of a director David Lynch is that he's willing to do anything, even if it involves darkness, to really symbolism and visual arts. And it just shows how good of a director that he is that he's able to do that, but also shake things up with a different genre, and then that he's still able to make a pretty fantastic film. And one thing's for certain, he really set the tone for the last 10 minutes of the film. Throughout the movie, you've been waiting for Alvin to finally get to Lyle's house, but the other events keep you sidetracked that you kind of almost forget about it. And then once he starts to bring it up, you're like, oh yeah, you're like, I forgot what the whole plot of this movie was about. So right when Alvin knows that he's close to his brother's house, he gets on that last road that takes him right to there. And then all of a sudden his tractor quits on him. And then him having a bad back and walking problems, he just sits and he just stands there like he's almost defeated. It doesn't really say anything, but as an audience member, it lets you think about that moment. You're only thinking, what is Alvin thinking? That's what you're thinking, is what is going through Alvin's mind. He's thinking, man, you've gone this far, and he just quits right there. And could you imagine if the movie just ended right there, and then the audience would just get pissed, and you're like thinking, is this how it ends? You're thinking, are you going to get up and walk because you know the house is right there? You know, what is he going to do? So as he's sitting on this road, another man in a John Deere tractor comes by, and you don't really hear what they're saying, but you can see him talking, and then he points. And so the guy actually helps him, and Alvin's able to start his tractor back up, and he follows him, and you kind of see him walking back and forth, and then he points, and the next thing you know, Alvin shows up at the right driveway. Now, I wonder if the last guy is kind of a metaphor or symbolism to someone else in the Bible, you know, now that I bring that up. Because it's almost like he just came out of nowhere, has no name, it wasn't a really important character. He didn't really have much background to his character. However, if it wasn't for him, it almost seems like without him, Alvin never would have made it to his house. You know, and not only that, because throughout the whole film, people have tried to help Alvin, and he's refused because he's stubborn as it gets.
And you're going to have to use a walker now to get around.
No walker.
That could be a diabetes-related problem. I would like to run a few tests.
No tests, and I'm not paying for no x-rays.
Well, I see and hear that you smoke. My guess is you're in the early stages of emphysema.
And I'm not going to ruin anything just by the chance of you maybe watching it. He does make it to Lyle's house, but just to build up that anticipation, if you happen to watch it, it really builds up the first time you watch it. Because you're thinking to yourself, man, is Lyle even alive? You find out that this 300 miles, it's actually been 3 months. So 3 months after the stroke, Lyle could be dead, you know? And you're thinking, oh man, I really hope Alvin gets through this. And and I can tell you what, the ending really hits you hard. And it really didn't take much. It's a very short ending. The film doesn't last very long at Lyle's house. So it's almost impactful because you realize that's all that matters. You know, we don't need a drug out ending of emotions and all that. It was short and simple. It got to the point and it really hit home. And then it also made you kind of realize the movie was just about Alvin making things right, just as much as it is making things right with his brother, as for the other strangers that he came across. And I think that's what I really enjoy about the movie. And like I said, this movie really shows you that it's sticking close to family that really matters. I mean, he's even proved that to the Farley brothers. The Farley brothers were a mechanic and they were fighting, and he's like, hey, you guys are brothers. That's the only one you got. I haven't seen mine in years. And what really hits an even stronger impact on me is that most people know it's dedicated to the real life Alvin Strait due to his passing and as a memoriam. But shortly after the movie was released, Richard Farnsworth, who played him, passed away as well. I can't tell if this is some freaky voodoo shit, like with the Madden cover curse, or a myth that I recall hearing about, that there was an SNL script that would kill you after you read it, like such as John Belushi, Andy Kaufman, Phil Hartman, and Chris Farley. Wait a minute. Chris Farley. The Farley brothers were in this movie. In fact, their names show up right before it says in memory of Alvin Straight. Whoa. That's a whole new level of freaky conspiracy theory. Well, regardless of if you believe in that or not, this movie is so great, it is definitely remaining in my library, hopefully yours. And not just that, but it's making sure that Richard Farnsworth and Alvin Straight remain in our hearts, and hopefully yours as well.
Thank you.